Ladies and gentlemen, there are few things more exciting in the world of chess than the loss of a queen. It is your most valuable and your most powerful piece. At an elementary level, the beginners are moving their queens out confidently to squares that are occupied by enemy pieces and getting them taken. But on a higher level, grandmasters will keep their queens safe until just the right moment, where they deliberately give it to their opponent, but then deliver a final blow. But in this video, I would like to share with you the most epic queen sacrifices I could find by chess computers. A person who helped me compile some of these games was Sam Copeland. He works for chess.com and has a YouTube channel of his own. Do check it out in the description. Let's get right into it. Timestamps on the video player. Here we go. The first game that I have for you is between Stockfish and Anti-Fish. Yes, a computer designed to counteract the power of what is Stockfish. Now, we have a French defense to start off, the Tarrasch variation, a mainline position where black rotates the knight backwards and then uses white's overextended pawns against, well, I was going to say him or her, but it's a robot, so I don't really know. We have a clarification in the center of the board. The queenside pawns come forward because black wanted to kick the knight out from defending the center, and white voluntarily moves this king to f1. Computers like to do this. They actually will not castle in the modern era as long as they can take some space with pawns, and they are much better at evaluating whether or not the king is safe. Now, we have f takes e5, queen h5 check, and both kings have now moved seemingly into like some sort of danger, actually. White already seems to have a very powerful initiative. At this point, playing the move knight g6. If you take this, then queen h8, and you might as well call it a day. You are completely busted here. So that obviously doesn't happen. We have pawns flying off the center of the board, and the place where I would like to pause is right here. You see, Stockfish has wandered into the territory of Anti-Fish and thinks that it is winning. And here, Anti-Fish, while all of this stuff is hanging over here, actually decides that it wants its queen to be trapped, and it wants to sacrifice it for 2 pieces and 1 pawn. Stockfish is up 2 points of material, and from this point forward is in a mad dash to coordinate the 5 major pieces it has, knight, bishop, queen, 2 rooks, against black's position. And now what Anti-Fish does is it takes control of the center of the board with e5, and it brings all the pieces directly to the middle to make sure that everything is protected. One way to play against a queen when you have some sort of imbalance, in this case it's bishop, knight, and a pawn, or anything, rook, knight, pawn, limit your trades and coordinate your pieces perfectly. Also, when the opponent has poor pawn mobility, you can't break through a strong structure. Right? The only way to break through is to trade pieces, and white can't afford to do that, so Anti-Fish brings both bishops, knight, and knight back. The center is completely unbreakable. If you try to lunge forward with a move like f4, black immediately takes advantage of the weakened square, is in here attacking everything. The f-file is going to be a problem for this king, and it's a really dire situation. And as the game progressed, I mean, black just did more of the same. White is desperately looking for a safe spot for the king, also to activate the rook, and Anti-Fish, meanwhile, just launches everything forward. Look at this. Look at this. It anticipated that the king was going to run out this way, and only 20-something moves after that sacrifice of a queen, Stockfish was like, wait a minute, I think I'm not even better. And by move 60, it was clear that Anti-Fish was going to successfully break through, utilizing the really, really strong pawn as well as the coordination. I did mention earlier that once white's pieces were traded or made to be very passive, that the queen would not be felt. And ultimately, the queen was won back, resulting in, and by the way, patiently won back, I might add. Look at this move. Queen's completely stuck, or else you just promote in a moment. And Anti-Fish went on to just win the endgame by getting the rook off, and ironically, being up a queen at the end of it. So that's the first example. Let's go to example number 2. Our second example is known as Leela's Immortal Game, and after a relatively standard opening, the opponent, Stockfish 11, played the move c5, attacking in the center of the board. At this point, you should all know that if you leave a computer or a super grandmaster unattended in the year 2021, they will play which move? Very good, pawn to h4. The idea of pawn to h4 is setting up the fact that the rook is still targeting the pawn and white has not castled. So there is the opportunity to play bishop takes h7. So for example, it would look something like this, a Greek gift sacrifice opening up like this, and the queen would then ultimately join the attack either with the rook or the knight targeting the h7 square. Greek gifts don't always work, but in this case they do, and after black commits a pawn forward, weakening the dark squares near the king and potentially having the g6 pawn as a target, Leela castles. Yeah, go figure. And then Leela completely gives away the h4 pawn, but is like, you know what? I have the h6 square, the rook's gotta move, and now I'm gonna play rook e1. Computers love stabilizing the center, which you see that it does, brings the rook to the party, and begins mobilizing forward. But black is just in time with counterplay. Black removes the bishop, queen c4, and then retreats, and offers the b7 pawn to Leela to attack the queen, and the game would probably be neutralized. The queen side would kind of clear out. But here, Leela decides to bring the knight back, which on a surface level makes absolutely zero sense, because now the rook sees the queen. That was the whole point of putting that there. And at that point, Stockfish is like, well, knight takes b4. Duh. Now the queen has to take the pawn because it's hanging, and it can't take this because, well, for obvious reasons. But Leela at this point is like, I'm gonna end up in a GothamChess YouTube video, aren't I? So queen takes b4, bishop takes, a takes, and now knight jumps into f6. Now, black could have done a lot of things here, but knight to f6 was coming no matter what, forcing the king away. And if we just pause here for a moment, you can take a bishop, a rook, or play knight g5, knight f7, which is mate. It wouldn't happen, but it's a threat. And Leela just takes back and is down 5 points of material, but the biggest problem for white is not the queen. It's the 2-on-1 that could potentially distract the white pieces from their task. So Leela attacks the bishop and freezes black's position. Now black can't move the pawns, and white has a free hand at just expanding and suffocating. This is a little bit of shuffling, but it finally plays the move pawn to f4, and then here it comes up with a nasty idea. Kaboom. If you take with the bishop, it's mate on the back rank. So in the meanwhile, we take the bishop, we back up to check, your king starts running, we attack your queen, and we take the pawn on h7 because that is the only way we will get to the g5 square. And black is bullied, their pieces are bouncing around, and now the queen is lost. Because if you play king to e7, I will check you and take this and your other rook, so you sack your queen, and this is perhaps the most savage moment of the game, as Leela, although sacking a queen for those two pieces is bad enough, doesn't even take the rook. It doesn't want to lose the knight. So what it does, it waits for black, and then finally threatens mate, and now it's guaranteed to win a rook, and just brings the king to f3, and Stockfish resigned. On to example number 3. Example number 3, Stockfish once again versus Houdini 5. These are obviously older versions of these computers, but the queen's sacrifices are juicy. What we have here is a dragon Sicilian. King g8, king b1, opposite side castling. You see open file, and white jumps into d5, removing the knight from the cover of this rook, or from the scope of this rook, and the second black tries to create counterplay, we have an en passant and queen to h2. The threat is very obvious, ladies and gentlemen. It's to take on h7, and that threat is unavoidable. So black plays this move and prepares to evacuate. Now, queen h7, at this point, apparently is not even the best way to play, because there's rook h8 and the queen gets trapped. So white needs to play a move first, so that this move is possible to hit the queen. At this point, we have queen e5, and it's looking like the game is over. Like, you have no way to defend this. But it's not so simple. Queen takes bishop. If queen takes g6 comes with check, then after this, black is safe. So white must play with the rook. Now, if you go back, there's a new threat. It's not this, it's check. That's the problem, disconnecting you. So white is devastating here and on the verge of simply destroying the position. Every single piece has arrived. The king is overdue on rent. The mafia of the white pieces is about to beat him up. And here black uncorks. Savagery with the move, queen takes. This looks like a mouse slip. I mean, this just looks like a game that an 800 sent to me. Boom! Oh, wait a minute, never mind. Here's the point. You have to take, otherwise queen c2 or queen b2, whatever. So takes. Now the knight is hanging. Now the knight is hanging with a check, and I'm gonna take your rook. But it's not that simple, because if you take the rook, I have backup. Stockfish saw all this, and it would then pick up the bishop, and this is still, the king is wide open. It just doesn't have enough defense. This king is safe. But There is a sequence of moves here. You give the check first. Why? Because if the bishop or the rook get taken once the rook departs, this king gets hunted. So check, 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 and it hides in the corner. This is absolutely mind-boggling, but at the end, there is bishop takes f1. So black has emerged with rook, bishop, bishop for a queen. Now, yes, this pawn is hanging, but the bishop comes back to g7, and the game rages on. Now, the perfectionists at this point, if you know this game, if you know this game, you're probably thinking this. If you don't know this game, I'm going to spoil something. It's going to be mildly disappointing. Black actually ended up losing this game. Apparently, the queen is so powerful with just one pawn on the board that it was able to win a brutally long endgame. And well, the queen sacrifice for black was in vain, but it's such a savage sacrifice. And it just goes to, like, you know, any human loses this game with white, but look at this king hunt. Folks, I mean, this is just unbelievable. You see, Stockfish was avoiding a draw because Stockfish could have just repeated moves. But it thought it was winning. And for that reason, I think just the beauty of the game minus the result is just mind-blowing. That this position can still go on with this king running literally the length of the board. So that's example number 3. Example 4 is another fun one. This is a shorter time control game, so you'll see things from computers you normally won't see. These are still by far the strongest chess mechanisms, hardware, whatever, software, I don't know, in the world. So even in Blitz, they're extremely powerful. We have a Caro-Kann advanced variation, and I actually will show you the entire game here. White employs a setup which is known as a positional advanced variation Caro-Kann. The bishop on e3 is pretty rare, but it's designed against black's main idea of playing the move c5. So for that reason, black actually delays c5 and instead goes for f6. It's a standard idea. And this is the real idea behind this, is that you can go long castle. Now, computers will obviously not calculate the full extent of the risks, just like humans, in a blitz time control, but we're going to have a super imbalanced fight. So c4, king b8, because you want to get the king off of this file where it's coming. And now black plays a fascinating move. I would never play this move in a million years. It's also why my name is Levi Rosman, and not Stockfish knew. Pawn takes c4. Why would you open I mean, like, I would go rook g8 and cd5. I'm not scared. I put my knight here, you know, something like this. But something about rook g8 the computer didn't like. And it decided to take on c4 and then play this hilarious move. And the queen is on the other side. So white here just continues to prod forward with the move b4. Black plays knight g6. At some point, the move rook to g8 will occur, and it occurs right now. So white is about 2 moves away from destroying the structure, and black is 2 moves away from delivering a mate. Obviously, something is brewing here. Bishop to f1 is played, offering the bishop on e3 for capture. White is probably like, if this bishop is taken, well, black loses one of their attacking pieces, so obviously this can't be that bad. But rook takes d4. The queen is under attack, but maybe Leela thought that it was just going to wander over this way. Maybe Leela wanted to take and just get the queen off the board and just play an endgame where it would suffer for a little bit, but potentially hold the game. But Leela went to b3, and black jumped into h4 with the knight. The threat is very obvious. There is a pin on this pawn, so knight to f3 is a check, and naturally you slide your king out of the way, but white had other ways. White could have covered the f3 square by moving the knight, which is a thing, and then the queen would have patrolled all of the squares. But since it's a blitz game, Leela played king to h1, and here Stockfish said, I'm tired of getting embarrassed in this video, so now I am going to assert full dominance. Kaboom! And queen takes h2 must be played with mate incoming. This move is played with devastating and angry intentions, and here it is. King takes, knight jumps into f3, and the king has nowhere to go. If it goes here or here, it's mated, it cannot escape, and its ladder mate, not quite, bishop blocks, but the kill shot. This bishop, its first move of the entire game, 24 moves, and it makes the most powerful move. It goes to show you, if you've been on Earth for 24 years, but you make one good decision in all that time, it might still be the one that changes your life for the better. You didn't think you'd get philosophical advice in this video, but there you go. And that is how Stockfish detonated a nasty queen sacrifice checkmate to defeat Leela Chess 0. Might surprise you. This is a game that I saw Eric Rosen play with the black pieces in some sort of like Lichess classical arena. And it was against an individual whose account was closed for cheating. But there was an absolutely insane queen sacrifice. It was a Sicilian Rossolimo variation, the idea being that you take on c6 to damage the structure, but black plays e6 and white plays knight c3, which is already kind of a very odd move. Knight d4 jumps into the middle of the board trying to say you should have taken me when you could, because now if you do it, your knight just gets kicked out and this is not really any good for white. So castles, a6, the bishop awkwardly stands here in the center, but black plays knight e7 to try to reinforce the knight on d4, like this, and bishop b2. Bishop e7 played, maybe you want to go counteract the bishop and play short castle. We have knight takes d4. Now black has a choice. You put your pawn on c5 to take that knight, but you also put your knight to take that knight. Eric plays pawn takes, knight e2. And here he has a choice. He can play bishop to f6 to defend this, but you see white is going to play f4 e5. That's a little bit unpleasant. So instead, after knight to e2, he decides to create counterplay indirectly on that square. So for example, here would just lose the game because now two bishops hang at the same time, which is not very good, right? So white plays f4 anyway. Black proceeds to take on e4 and play bishop f6. The next move that black is going to play is short castle and be completely fine. White cannot move this bishop yet because of this diagonal. Queen e1, queen g3 is a possibility, and the game would proceed. Except, at this point, his computer cheater opponent did, in fact, move his bishop. That move is very computer-esque, sacrificing material and negating the opponent's king's mobility, leaving it in the center of the board. Eric, from a human standpoint, correctly plays the move d3, calculating a very simple variation. Something will take, he will take the rook, then play f6 and king f7. He will have a material advantage, slight damaging of his king safety, but he will be okay. But black was shocked, Eric was shocked, when the pawn took. You're gonna damage your own structure like that? Okay, fine, takes, and f6. This is my plan after all. Now it's a little unclear what white's next move is. You know, if you play f5 just trying to come forward, I can just take. Because again, what you need is the safety of the king, but removal of your opponent's pieces. Those pawns come back to bite you now. So Eric played f6 and probably thought he was okay, and white just very calmly played queen c3. Just queen c3. The bishop stayed on e4, and that's why the pawn took to pressure this. And you will see very soon why else the bishop stayed here. So Eric plays king f7 as part of his plan, and white plays just very slow, improving move to just target where this king is. Computers are very good at these nonchalant-looking moves that suck your soul out of your body. Queen to a5. Now the bishop obviously should come back to b2. No, it goes here, disconnecting the queen from the rest of this area. And now the queen can't participate in the defense, and the b4 and a4 and b5 idea is there very much, as well as the knight coming to the middle. And that's exactly what white wants, to lure the queen into the territory and leave it behind and storm forward. And Eric here played b5, leaving his knight completely to hang, but attacking this queen with the idea to simplify. The computer plays this move, giving the queen an equal threat. And after queen to b2, we have knight to g5 check. You can't take it because this would open up the rook and you just can't defend your king. So Eric goes here and the computer plays queen to d5, and that is why you needed the bishop here, because the threat is that if you take, it's mate. It's just mate. It's simply mate. No matter what you do, it's mate. So Eric tries to sacrifice the queen right back, but what ends up happening is an endgame where he is suffering just simply too much material loss, and white went on to win in this position when Eric resigned. An absolutely disgusting sacrifice. But folks, I have a surprise for you. Folks, I know that clickbait is a bad thing, but that kind of draws you in a little bit further, because if you never made it this far in the video, you wouldn't have known about this bonus game. Well, you're about to enjoy. Shredder is playing with the white pieces versus Gull. Now, Shredder, if you look at the material, looks like it has an advantage because it has two rooks versus just rook, but These knights are extremely powerful, and black also has a 2-pawn material advantage. In fact, Shredder has actually been suffering throughout this game, and now black is really looking to win, because these 2 pawns are about to make some progress down the board. The bind is nice, the king here is completely safe, and if anything, white's king is weaker than black's king. Rook d7, and that's it. Here comes pawn to h4, and slowly but surely, Gull is going to suck the life out of Shredder. But here, Shredder embarks on an absolutely fascinating journey. First, it plays queen g4, and offers a trade of rooks on its own terms, which looks like a blunder because comes queen e8, and how does white deal with the pawn on a4 hanging and this? You see, if white plays the move b3, the queen transfers this way in support of the h-pawn and the pressure on this rook. The knights will go tango around, and black will very easily win the game. And it looked at this point as if Shredder had simply lost the thread after takes, queen a4. Mate is unstoppable. You cannot prevent queen c2, queen d1. No matter what you do, there is nothing that you can do. If you play rook to e7 check, first of all, there is no queen move. And if you play this, which is what happened, there's no more checks. Literally, there's no more checks. Queen f4, queen g3, it's all covered. Rook e8 is covered. How do you prevent mate in just a move or two? Well, the only thing that you could do is potentially sack your rook. Or is it? Shredder plays this, which seems a bit peculiar, but you start to understand it in a moment, because if queen takes b3, e8 is no longer covered. Okay, fair. But Shredder, I don't really understand what you're doing, because knight can also take on b3, and you still don't have a check. You don't have a check. But you do. You have this check. Freezing the only pawn move that you have. Your king is now completely paralyzed, and you just check the king. And you run and check the king. Rook d7. It can be taken with both pieces, but it's stalemate. Shredder finds an absolutely improbable defense to imminent mate by sacrificing the whole lot of pieces, including the queen, for a stalemate trap. And that is why I saved this for last, because it's nasty. Folks, I hope you enjoyed. I really like making these concept videos for you on all sorts of interesting topics in chess. And as always, if you made it this far, I just want to say thank you. You are very much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. Get out of here.